issues facing cities. We can design and test better methods of connecting urban people, urban places, and nature. We can include urban dimensions in projects that traditionally have focused on rural areas. We can make progress on the ground in several pilot urban areas. And we can do something that I think is a very cost-effective strategy, and that is to encourage urban zoos, aquariums, botanic gardens, and natural history museums to include exhibits and outreach on nature in the local environment and connect those to urban protected areas. It's amazing to me how little of that is actually going on. On the other hand, there's great examples of what can be done. To support all of this, we need to recruit, as IUCN members, organizations concerned with the urban dimensions of conservation. And we need to recruit more urban specialists to the membership of IUCN's 6 commissions, and by urban specialists, I mean conservationists who work on urban matters. As to structure, first we need to keep in mind that any structure has got to be done by people who understand how IUCN works. This is a very complex organization. We need to draw on people with the skills needed to work with those concerned with the built environment. That's what bridge building is talking about. And we need to remember that the challenge is not to incorporate urban expertise in IUCN, but to connect to it. To clarify this, I guess I should say that I think we don't accomplish a lot by trying to recruit urban planners, architects, and so forth to serve on our commissions, unless they share our interest in conservation of nature. We believe the best options for IUCN structure are a combination of forming an IUCN urban coalition, strengthening the existing urban specialist group, designating an urban advocate on the IUCN Council, and including urban dimensions in IUCN projects. An urban coalition would be endorsed by the Council, of course. It would be pretty much self-organizing and consist of IUCN member organizations, units of several commissions, units of the Secretariat, and other organizations that would be invited. Less desirable options are listed here. I won't go into them, but I will say that if you're interested in looking at this, this is described, the reason they're described in the memo that's online. The next steps are action by the newly elected IUCN Council. And we don't necessarily have to wait for that to start working on organizing an IUCN urban coalition. We do need a strategy, and we will continue, regardless of what happens, to strengthen the WCPA third specialist group. For further information, to get in touch with us, just go to this urban portal, IUCN-urban.org. I could say more. For example, urban places, large cities especially, are places where information and ideas and opinions are exchanged. Where media are major universities, cities are the political capitals, the cultural capitals, the business capitals, and so forth. And so they are key places for conservation as a whole. What am I supposed to do now? I think rather than open for discussion at this point, I think I'll have Len give his presentation on the book that he and I know him wrote on urban editors. Len Hyman is a political scientist at the Harris Institute of Political Science. He's one of the deputy chairs of the Urban Specialist Group.
Well, thank you very much, Ed, for those wonderful remarks, which clearly and succinctly laid out much of the guiding line that this urban protected areas guideline project will follow. What I will do here this evening already, is I will explain the scope and the objectives and the projected audience of the project. I'll explain the places where we will be working, and I'll explain a little bit about the guidelines that the book will contain. This photograph is from a place in the city of Sao Paulo. In the background, you have the city of Sao Paulo, where there are some 20 million people living, and just in front of it, you have the Cantareta State Park and the Alfredo Lopes State Park, which is the most visited state park in Brazil. So, why focus on urban protected areas? As Ted rightly pointed out, conservation needs urban people, and urban people need conservation. And urban protected areas are an excellent and important example of that codependence, that interdependence. Urban protected areas provide directly benefits for urban people. They provide recreational opportunities. They provide ecosystem services upon which the urban people depend. But they're also ambassadors for nature conservation. By this we mean that they are places where urban people who otherwise would not have contact with nature have the opportunity to come and to learn and to love nature. If we are serious about building constituencies that value nature, and this is something we must do with people, because people who must value nature are more and more often living in cities, as I showed earlier, we must make our arguments for why conservation matters in places where people can hear them. Urban protected areas provide a window, a very important window, and an entry point to nature. Urban people who would not otherwise have the opportunity to visit protected areas in cities. And these urban protected areas perform this function. And the other thing that's important to mention about why we're looking so importantly at urban protected areas, in these places, they can be difficult and costly to manage. There are many impacts from urbanization that we are aware of that make conservation difficult. These urban protected areas are perhaps in many ways more complicated to manage than protected areas in more wilderness places, in wilder places. However, the opportunities urban protected areas offer for exposing people to nature and for meeting the needs of urban people more than compensate for the costs associated with managing them. And so, why this book? This book is because there isn't a handbook that exists for managing these urban protected areas. Urban protected areas are a special kind of protected area that require different skills, different resources, and have different conditions than protected areas in the hinterlands. As such, it is important for protected area managers to have the opportunity to learn from each other in these other places where they work, to learn from colleagues in other places. And this book is an important step in promoting exchange between such urban protected sites. Accordingly, the target audience for this volume are protected area managers, protected area system managers, policymakers, those who make policy about conservation, those who may see urban protected areas as being more expensive than they're worth. The argument that we make is that they are not. Those who see that urban protected areas are more difficult than may be worthwhile. Our argument is that they are not. Urban protected areas are hugely important for urban people, and therefore are hugely important for conservation more broadly. So the scope of the book, I'm very brief here. We are not looking at nature in cities writ large. Protected areas are very specific cases. They have legal protection, like all protected areas. They are managed for by biodiversity. They're managed for conservation. And as such, the techniques that managers undertake in such places are different than those techniques that are necessarily undertaken for managing nature beyond protected area boundaries. Places like backyards and recreational parks and vacant lots and rooftops all are potential contributions to urban nature. However, the guidelines which we are preparing are focusing specifically on urban protected areas because they require special skills and special resources. To explain more clearly what we mean by urban protected areas, we will provide 14 examples taken from around the world. I'll show you in a moment here where they come from. We've chosen these places because of their wide geographic spread, because of their diverse economic and political backgrounds, because of the diverse ecosystem types they recommend, because they include, because of the different IUCN protected area categories that they touch upon. Places like the Florida Everglades, number 2, is an IUCN wilderness. It's a category, some portions of our category, varieties of category 1, A and B both, right on the boundary of Miami. There are others which are IUCN category 2, such as the Table Mountain National Park, number 9. Other more protected landscapes. And the idea is that urban protected areas are everywhere. They're not an exception. They are in fact quite common. When I began working on this project, I was surprised how easy it was to find examples of urban protected areas. I had, quite honestly, did not know very much about protected areas in South Korea. However, as soon as I looked, instantly, there were many examples of urban protected areas which came to the surface. As soon as I began looking in Australia, for example, again, in every state I looked, there were multiple examples of urban protected areas. Quite frankly, in any country one were to look, if it's a country that has cities, it's a country that has urban protected areas. That's protected areas, of course. But most of us do it with our global efforts to increase protected area coverage. Increasing coverage in places where people are is something that we should also be mindful to do. So, to give you an idea of what some of these places look like, this is the Bukhansan National Park here in Seoul, called in Korea. You see, it is surrounded by people. It is one of the most visited urban protected areas we've come across. In 2008, it had 10 million visitors. The year just before, it only had 5 million. And there are some very interesting reasons for that, which I'll get to in a moment. All of the portraits will have these maps. These maps are produced with data courtesy of the Promotion Laboratory in NASA. And any protected area manager is welcome and able to access the data so they can have such imagery for their own protected areas. One of the other things that this protected area this volume is doing is connecting protected area managers with available technology tools and resources. And availability of this kind of information is a product of our specialist groups, members. It's building those kinds of linkages among urban protected area managers. This is what the portraits will look like when complete. Each of those 14 sites will have one. They will have a map, they will have color photographs. They will be brief, but they will also, in addition to explaining the political context, the cultural context, the environment, the ecological context of the place, what is being protected, what value it has for the urban dwellers. It also makes reference to the guidelines that which make up the bulk of the volume. This project has been one of weaving, where we don't breathe, please, it's a very long weaving. But the project has been one of weaving, where we have had 14 individual sites, each of which has illustrated 33 guidelines. And the idea is to use the examples from each of those sites to demonstrate these guidelines in practice. Now these guidelines, there are 33 of them. Each of them will be illustrated by practical applications from the portraits. They're not theoretical guidelines which we've invented, these are things that come from practice which we've collected from sites. And this volume is an opportunity for sites to exchange information and eventually exchange contact and experience with each other. So we've organized them under 4 headings. The first, as it should be and as it must be, is urban protected areas and people. Because that makes urban protected areas urban. It's their capacity and their potential and their real contributions to the livelihoods and the wellness and the well-being of people. And also, the brief opportunity for those people to provide these protected areas. So just touching on a few examples of these. Provide access to all, and especially reach out to the underprivileged. Because urban protected areas can, and has sometimes been, places for the affluent. And so undertaking places where, which may be a bit distant from town, where transportation isn't always easy, ensuring ease of transportation. Urban places are places with many immigrants, where interpretive information, if not provided in language they can understand, will be exclusionary. Urban protected areas are for all. And urban protected area managers must make outreach to all, otherwise they're losing the opportunity to meet the needs of all urban people. In the same way, they're losing the opportunity to benefit from as broad a constituency as possible that learns to love the protected area and, by extension, nature. Other examples of protected areas and people are to encourage responsible visitor behavior, because one of the other side of having so many people potentially able to visit the park is that so many people will visit the park. And when they come, there are opportunities for education, also about that which is found in the park, but also about erosion and the sorts of impacts which come from millions of visitors in relatively small protected areas. And there's a steering strategy which parks have undertaken, which we will be relaying in volume. As well, human-wildlife conflict is another matter which comes up quite frequently when natural systems and urban systems meet. And as urban protected areas rightly protect habitat for wildlife, when the wildlife strays beyond the protected area boundaries, they can be places where conflict between wildlife and humans can occur. And so managing human-wildlife conflict is also a job of community education, educating people how to engage, how to relate to the animals they encounter, but also managing the protected area to provide sufficient food and feeding opportunities and habitats so wildlife is less likely to stray into urban places looking for its own resources. A second related heading is urban protected areas and places. Because a protected area is essentially, at its most base existence, a land use planning decision. It is a decision to use this land for the conservation of nature and not use it for housing and not use it for waste dumping or not use it for any other purpose. And that decision structures not only the place, but the places around it. It creates a lot of value for those landowners living around the protected area. It creates a lot of opportunity as well for connecting to other places that may not have protection. Which is why we have one of our guidelines is about preventing the area from becoming a green island. Having a protected area that's surrounded by urban development cuts it off from its broader habitat, from its broader environment. Working with those who make decisions about land beyond the protected area boundaries, building corridors and connectivity spaces is one job for protected area managers. Because even though the areas outside the protected area are beyond the protected area manager's jurisdiction, they are nonetheless areas of huge importance for the function of the protected area itself. I'll go through these a little bit more quickly. Considering whether to restore or divest or swap degrade land is a very sensitive issue. It's an issue which doesn't often come up in wilderness areas, but it's an issue which can be very important in urban places, where degradation is acute and where there are large vulnerable parcels which are outside the scope of protection. And we'll speak about that in volume as well. The two other headings are urban protected areas and institutions, because protected area managers cannot protect their areas alone. There are many other actors in the urban fabric which have direct influence on the protected area because of their influence on the areas around it. As well, there are organizations of people, community groups, which can mobilize and be mobilized for promoting and protecting the protected area by means of meeting the needs of people. And the last heading is understanding, improving, and promoting urban protected areas. This heading includes such things as cultivating and mobilizing political capital. But managing an urban protected area is not exclusively a technical matter. It's not only a matter of getting the visitor, setting the fees at an appropriate level to regulate visitor entrances, providing sufficient pathways and waste bins, ensuring sufficient fuel reduction burns. It's not only a technical matter, it's also a political matter. Because when there are desires to reclaim the protected area for urban purposes, the only way to resist those kinds of pressures is with political help. And that political assistance is built and by engaging with politicians and with elected authorities, but also by engaging with people, building constituencies that love and value the protected area. Only if you engage the populations will they then stand and help the protected areas protect the protected area. It's not only a technical job, it's a political job. And cultivating skills for political management in a protected area manager is not always part of the brief for protected area managers in general. Wilderness protected areas protected area managers don't come necessarily with that standard skill set, and encouraging them to obtain it and seeking this improvement is something which is also wise for urban protected areas. There are 33 of these guidelines. There is more information about it available on the website of the Environment Institute, our portal for the Urban Initiative, where a full